Hi everybody, this is Anne Emery. Today I'm going to teach you about spark lines and spark bars, which are miniature within cell charts for exploring your data, like the ones shown in the screenshot to the right. We'll look at three different examples together. Here's the first example. It's a professional society's membership patterns by interest group. The second example is about donations to a university by graduating class. And the third example shows county population trends by age group. I use spark lines and spark bars for a few different things. First, I use them just to help me as the analyst see the data and see the patterns, the distribution, the spread, and the highs and lows in the numbers. Second, I use them to help me think about additional analyses that I might want to conduct. How might I want to slice and dice the data as I'm working in it? What types of additional functions and calculations do I need to use? And third, I use them to think about what type of charts I might want to create for a final chart or a deliverable for a client or maybe for a colleague. And you can print or PDF these directly, and finally, we'll show you how to do that as well. Here's the first example, a professional society's membership patterns by interest group. When people join this professional society, they have the option of joining up to 5 of these different topical interest groups. So what we're looking at is the number of members over time. So this group had 661 members in 2011, 758 members in 2012, and so on. So let's insert some spark lines and spark bars. All you need to do is highlight the data that you want to visualize. So let's create one for this row right here, just for the advocacy and policy change group. Then go up to your Insert tab in Excel and go over to the section that says Spark Lines. You could create one with lines or with columns, or if you have data that has both positive and negative numbers, like a lot of financial data does, you could create a win-loss sparkline. Let's create a column sparkline for starters. You get a little pop-up menu, and you have to insert 2 pieces of information. First, it wants to know what data you want to visualize, what's the range. We already told Excel that we want to visualize B5 through E5. And second, you have to select the location range. So you want to tell Excel which cell you want to put that chart into. So we'll click on F5 right there. That's where we want to insert our spark line. And then hit OK. And there's our spark bar. We'll go through a few different formatting tips as well. First, let's create spark bars all the way down the spreadsheet. You don't have to go to the Insert tab and insert a new spark line for every single cell. All you do is you're looking for this little square in the lower right hand corner. You put your mouse right on it and you'll get a plus sign hovering over that square. And you click and drag that down and it's going to fill in spark bars through your entire spreadsheet. Great, that's perfect. You can also insert spark lines. So let's do the same thing, but this time with lines. We'll highlight the data, go to Insert. This time we'll click on the line icon. The data range is already selected. We just need to indicate the location range. This time we'll put it in G5. Look for this little square in the right hand corner and drag it down the spreadsheet. Whether you use spark bars or spark lines is really up to you. I tend to use spark bars most of the time, just because the way the area is filled in the bar, it usually just helps me see the pattern a little bit better, especially once we do the formatting. What I recommend is that you try both different styles and see which one you think helps you see the data, because really at the end of the day, spark lines are for you as the analyst to help you with the preliminary analyses and to help you see your own data set. So it's really up to you which one you find most helpful. Okay, so let's go ahead and format these. First, let's change the color, just for fun. The default blue is just fine, but I'll show you the other color options. And we'll just change the spark bars for now. We'll leave the spark lines alone. So you'll notice that when the spark bars are selected, Excel gives you this little tab right here, Sparkline Tools and Design, and it turns it yellow so that you can see it. We have a few different ways we can change the color. First, we could use this menu right here. We could select purple or green, any color that you want. You can also use this option right here, Sparkline Color. Let's go ahead and use a light blue for now. You can also change the color of high points, low points, beginning points, or end points. So we still have our spark bars selected, and let's go ahead and highlight the high point in each of the different spark bars. Those are called marker colors, and you can change the color of the marker colors as well with this little menu right here. So right now the high points are in green. Let's change them to navy blue so we can see them. Next, let's change the size of the cell so we can see our spark bars and spark lines a little bit better. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll just expand my columns a little bit, just by dragging this border between the cells. And sometimes I expand the row height so I can see them a little bit better too. Finally, we need to change whether our spark bar is showing relative data or absolute data. So the default is relative, and here's what that means. We'll compare these two different cells. So this tiny bar right here corresponds to this value, 661. But this bar right underneath it, which is probably 4 or 5 times taller, corresponds to this value of 579. Those are pretty similar numbers though, and really the spark bars should be about the same height, especially when you compare it to this value, a 200. And you'll notice that this 200 is almost the exact same height as this 661. So that's because the spark bars are relative. So let's change them to absolute values and we'll see what happens. So highlight all of your spark bars. Then we get the Sparkline Tools Design tab. And go over to the axis icon along the right. Click on the button that says Same for all sparklines. We'll have to do this twice. So here's the first time, and then down here the second time, so that we're changing both the minimum and the maximum values. Okay, so that changes it a lot. Now as we scroll through, we can see a lot of really small bars and a lot of really tall bars. So now this bar and the one below it for 661 and 579, they're about the same height as they should be, but now the 200 is much, much smaller. And now this bar, which corresponds to 1262, is much, much taller. Okay, so that's a lot better. And we'll do the same thing for the lines. We don't want our viewer to be thrown off by the relative values. We want absolute values almost every single time. Axis, same for all sparklines. And the second time, axis, same for all sparklines. It drastically changes the shape of the line. Now they're pretty much flat all the way across. Okay, so let's move on to the second example. Okay, here's the second spark bar and sparkline example. We're looking at donations to a university by graduating class. So we've got pledge and gift amounts, the number of donors, percent of the class members who are participating, and the average gift size for the class of 1963, class of 1968, and so on. For example, we see that recently members of the class of 1963 donated $3.3 million. That was 239 donors giving money, which represented 47% of the graduating class, and there was an average gift size of $13,000. So let's insert some spark bars and sparklines to help us see all of the differences between the different classes. So we're going to do the same thing as before. We're going to highlight the data that we want to visualize. So we'll visualize this top row of data, pledges and gifts. go to the Insert tab, go over to the Spark Lines section, and we can select Lines, Columns, or Win-Loss Bars. We'll insert Spark Columns, or Spark Bars as they're called. Our pop-up menu asks us to indicate two different pieces of information, the data range, which is B6 through K6, and the location range. So let's put the Spark bar off to the right of the data right here in L6 and hit OK. So there's our tiny Spark bar, and we're looking for this tiny little green square in the lower right hand corner. We're going to hover our mouse over it until we get a plus sign and drag it down. And we could do the same thing if you wanted a spark line to compare. I'll just use spark bars this time. Next, let's change the color. So while the spark bars are already selected and highlighted, we can go up to Sparkline Tools, our Design tab. We can change the color either using this menu here or this little drop-down menu called Sparkline Color. I'll change them to dark blue, or excuse me, light blue, and I'll highlight some key points in dark blue later. Let's resize our columns and rows a little bit so we can see the bars better. So usually I'll stretch this column out, make it a little wider, and we'll make the rows taller as well. So I just highlighted the rows that I want, and I'm hovering my mouse in between like the 9 and the 10 right here, and just stretching them a little bit. Great, now I can see them better. Now let's change whether the data is relative or absolute, and this is going to drastically change the height of some of the spark bars. So we'll highlight our cells, go to the Design tab, go to the Axis icon, and under where it says Vertical Axis Minimum Value Options, click on Same for all spark lines. And we need to do it a second time. So where it says Vertical Axis Maximum Value Options, click on Same for all spark lines. And here's where the height of the bars is going to change a lot. Okay, it changed even more than I anticipated. So what happened is that these values are all in the millions. So we're talking about $3 million worth of donations, $6 million, $2 million. So that's why the height is pretty tall. But then these values are in the hundreds, and these are in the percentages, which is, you know, a fraction of 1. So that's teeny tiny bars we can't even see. These bars are only in the hundreds and the thousands, so they're small as well. So for this data set, we may or may not want to use absolute values. We might want to just stick with relative. It kind of depends if you're comparing these values to these values. So if you're comparing the different rows. In this case, I think what I'm most interested in is comparing the different classes, so comparing what's in the columns. So I'm going to change this back to relative. I think that's better. I mean, you'd have to try it a few different ways and see which way works best for you. And finally, let's highlight a few different values in a darker color. You might choose to highlight the high point, the low point, which you can just barely see. The smallest bars now are in red. We don't have any negative points, but if we did, you could highlight those. Or the first point, or the last point. For example, if you wanted to highlight the class of 2008's data. Let's highlight the high point, and we'll just look at which graduating class stood out in each of those scenarios. We might choose to change the marker color as well. Right now it's red, and we could change it to, let's say, a navy blue right here, so it stands out against the light blue. And there you go. There are some spark bars. Here's our third and final example of spark lines and spark bars. We're looking at county population trends by age group. So this is real census data that I got off the internet. And we're looking at 5 different counties in Northern Virginia: Arlington, where I live, Alexandria, Fairfax, Loudoun, and Prince William. and we're looking at how many residents fall into each of these age groups. How many people are under 5 years old, 5 to 9 years old, 10 to 14 years old, and so on. So the last few examples, we inserted spark bars off to the right here. So we highlighted across the rows and inserted a spark bar. This time we're going to insert spark bars off to the right, but also down below to the bottom so you can see the difference and see how the shape of the distribution is going to vary. Okay, so first let's insert spark lines off to the right as we've been doing. So we've got our row highlighted. Now we just go up to the Insert tab, click on either Spark Line or Spark Column. We need to indicate the location range, G5. Click OK. Look for that little square in the lower right-hand corner of the cell. Hover over it until you see the plus sign and drag it down. Great. Now let's do the same thing down here. So let's highlight the data down the column this time, a little bit different from what we've been doing. Go to the Insert tab, click on Line or Column, and we'll put this spark bar right here in B23. You can see that shape is already looking a lot different. So look for this little green square in the lower right-hand corner and drag it across. Let's resize these cells so we can see them a little bit better. So we'll make G a little bit wider. We'll make 23 a lot taller. And maybe we'll make each of these rows a little bit taller too so we can see the spark bars in column G. Next, let's change the color of our spark bars. We'll change this set of spark bars first. So highlight the set of spark bars, go to the Design tab. This time, let's make orange bars just for fun. And we'll make these orange as well. Let's see, maybe we'll make the tallest category, the tallest county in each case, a darker orange. So go up to the button that says High Point, and we'll see which county is the largest. The marker color by default is set to red, but let's change it to a darker orange so that they match. How about this one? We'll do the same thing on the bottom. We'll look at which age group is the largest. High point, and change the marker color. High point is dark orange now. And finally, we need to change whether the values are relative or absolute. It really shows a lot here what the difference is. So we can see just by glancing at the numbers in our data table that Arlington and Alexandria next to it are a little bit smaller counties. There's 2,000 people in this age group, 1,900 in this one, but 12,000 in Fairfax. Fairfax across the board seems to be a little bit larger. But when you look at the spark bars down to the bottom, they're all the same height because they're relative values. So let's change them to absolute, and this is where we're really going to see patterns pop out. So we'll highlight these bars, go up to the Design tab, and we're looking for the axis icon. We want the vertical axis minimum value to say same for all spark lines. And we'll do it again, and this is where we're going to see the shape of the bars change. Same for all spark lines. Okay, now we see a huge difference. So now Arlington and Alexandria are much, much shorter. Fairfax is a lot taller, and Loudoun and Prince William are somewhere in the middle. We'll do the same thing for these off to the right. It is showing us that Fairfax is the tallest one, so we've got Arlington, Alexandria, Fairfax, Loudoun, and Prince William. But the height might not be exactly the same since it's still relative. So we'll click on same for all sparklines the first time, and again the second time. And that changes the values a little bit. We can see smaller bars down here corresponding to these older age groups, and a little bit taller values kind of in the middle, showing all the people who are in their 30s, 40s, and 50s. Finally, let's get our sparklines ready to print or PDF so that we can more easily share them with our colleagues or with our clients. So all we need to do is highlight or select the area that we want to print, and then set the print area, and then adjust the page breaks. So first, let's highlight the area that we want to print, which is just our data table here, not the things that are in rows 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so we've got the whole area highlighted. Go up to the Page Layout tab, and you're looking for the icon that says Print Area. If you click on that once, you'll get a small drop-down menu. Click on the button that says Set Print Area. So that's telling Excel which cells you want to print or which ones you want to PDF. So now it's excluding all of the data or the information up here, and it's excluding the information over here, or the white space I should say, to the right. We can see that now we have these light gray borders surrounding the data that would get printed. And we see a dotted line right here. This is giving us the page break views. It's a lot easier to see if we go up to the tab that says View. Our default is a normal view, and if we click on the page break view, we'll be able to see it a little bit better. Okay, that's better. So now the area that would get printed or PDF'd is shown in white, and the area that's excluded is shown in gray. So right here, the spreadsheet is a little bit too wide for everything to fit on one page. So you can just drag this dotted line over, and that'll expand it so that everything fits on page 1. Let's see, we've got page 2 down here. Another option is that you can change your print area from portrait to landscape. So go up to the Page Layout tab, and you're looking for the icon that says Orientation. The default is portrait, but if you want to, you could change it to landscape. Now we need about 3 pages to print our data, which should be just fine. And you actually have a little bit more width in your page now that it's landscape view. So what I'm going to do is expand this first row so that my text isn't wrapping. I want all my text on one line. That should work. You could also expand, let's say, columns F and G. If you keep expanding and keep going, at some point you're going to need a new page. I want to show you what that looks like so you can anticipate it. Okay, there we go. At some point it tells you, hey, you've gone on to page 5 and page 6, so we don't want that, so you just shrink it back down a little bit until everything fits pretty nicely. We don't really want these 4 rows all by themselves on page 3. So you might decide to shrink all of your rows so that everything fits just on 2 pages. That's one option. Just shrink it a little bit. Or you might decide that that's too small, and you could expand your rows and just take up 3 full pages. So it takes just a few moments to play with this and get the layout just right, but you're really just dragging and dropping and kind of eyeballing it and choosing which layout works best for you. And finally, we want this top row with our labels to repeat on the top of every single page. So click on the 4 right here, the area off to the left of our row. So now all of row 4 is highlighted. On the Page Layout tab, go up to Print Titles. It says, choose rows and columns you'd like to repeat on each printed page, such as those with labels or headers. So we've got headers, that's exactly what we want. Under this pop-up menu, you're looking for the area that says rows to repeat at top. Just make sure that this 4th row is highlighted so that you get blinking lines around the outside, and hit OK. Now we should be able to print this, and we'll only get these 3 pages printed out. And we should also be able to PDF it. So let's PDF it now, and we'll make sure that the layout looks right, and if not, we can make some final adjustments. So to PDF, just go up to File, Save As, and we're going to save it as a PDF, and we'll call this membership data. We need to give it a minute for our PDF to pop up. Okay, that looks just perfect. Notice how we have the row here across the top, which is also on page 2, and our headers are also on page 3. Okay, so there you go. That would PDF or print just nicely. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed learning about sparklines, miniature within-cell charts that are helpful for exploring your data. We looked at 3 different examples together. We looked at a professional society's membership patterns by interest group, and we made that one printer and PDF friendly so that it can be easily shared. The second example was donations to a university by graduating class. And the third example showed county population trends by age group. And in that example, we inserted spark bars off to the right of our data, as well as on the bottom. If you have any questions, please feel free to comment directly on this video, or you can reach me through my website at annkemry.com. Thank you so much.